So let me just get started here. So once again, quick agenda. We're going to look at some of the trends that we're seeing in collaboration. These are trends that I'm seeing as I speak to end users, but a lot of it is coming from the InfoComm show that happened in June and things that we saw there. So we're going to look at some of the trends we're seeing. And then we're going to look at technology and how it reflects these trends, how it's answering the need for these trends. There will be a question and answer period. If you want to drop it into the chat, that's fine. Or if you just want to ask a question afterwards, by all means, we will have time for that. So let's go on. So some of the trends that we are seeing out there is the demand for inclusive and equitable meetings. And really what that demand is, we want, those people who are in the meeting that they want to be seen on the screen. They want to be able to be heard. They want it to be a discussion where as if we're all sitting in the same meeting and going back and forth. We're trying to create that atmosphere. Started, 6-7 years ago, we were starting to see this trend, was really hastened by COVID. That really, pushed a lot of the technology forward to address that need, because obviously in those years it was a much different kind of situation. But what we've seen is that there's this ongoing demand. We've become used to the way we do these type of meetings, and that continues. So that continues going onwards. One of the trends kind of relating to that over the years is that in order to answer these needs, what we're seeing is the video or camera companies and the audio companies, the microphones and the speakers, working together and forming partnerships, as opposed to a one company or each of these companies coming up with a solution that covers everything. We're seeing partnerships happening so that you get the best of the audio side and the best of the video side combining together into one overreaching, overall solution. One of the key things, and because it's so generic and overwhelming, I don't address it specifically in the technology solutions, but that Dante networking is becoming a go-to for many solutions within meeting spaces and collaboration spaces. Typically, Dante for years was known as an audio solution, but now we see Dante in audio, we see it in video solutions, and we see it in an AV over IP solution. As everything becomes networking, Dante Networks is seen as a effective, efficient, and more easy to use solution than some of the other things out there. So some of the things that you'll see when you're looking at a camera or audio or even AV over IP solutions is the term Dante AVA and Dante AVH. Dante AVA is like for 4K 60, 444. So that top end, it's only in terms of latency, it's a subframe latency, so very low latency. Dante AV-H, also 4K 60, but it's a 222, and as well there is a frame or two of latency in it, so it's not as high a low latency level as with AVA. So as you're seeing that and you're seeing this terminology, it's becoming kind of like a generic, we expect cameras to come out or some sort of solution that has an AVA connection, Dante connection. So some of the trends, small rooms and huddle rooms are back. There's definitely a demand for them, and we're seeing product design, and we'll talk about some of that product that are designed to meet these demands for these small rooms and huddle rooms. USB 3.2, this is the highest USB standard right now. And so what we're seeing is growth in that 3.2, especially when you're moving video and control over USB. With USB, as always, signal distance is a concern. It's got a limited distance it can run. After that, you degradation. So we have to look at solutions that are made to address the needs of transporting USB 3.2 signals. Digital signage in meeting spaces. And for me, this is sort of in its infancy and is starting to grow. Digital signage has been around for a long, long time. We see it in our open spaces, in hallways, different applications. But what we're starting to see is a request and a demand for digital signage to be in the room. And so what we're, really the goals of that is, improving the customer experience. You've got guests coming in, you want to enhance that experience for them as they come into your workspace. Also, it helps to generate ROI for that room and brings some return on the room when it's not being used within a meeting. And so within that trend, what we're seeing is that using existing gear as a media player, so that you're not buying a separate media player, but rather, you may use a wireless collaboration device or system on chip monitors. We're seeing more of that. So dive into that a little bit more in the solutions section of the presentation. Another trend that I wasn't too aware of, some of you in the municipal government in this sector may be a little bit more involved with this, but transcription is just being able to see the words during the meeting. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, but where I heard about it was at InfoComm. And I mean, I've been aware of it and I've had customers who asked about it, but I was at a roundtable of experts in collaboration and that, and they said one of the things to look forward to in the next coming years is that there's going to be a greater demand within certain meeting spaces where transcription is available. And really what that is that the spoken word is showing up, that people can see it, read it, that sort of thing. Discussion systems. We're seeing more and more of this where, we've worked with some people where the ceilings just are not acceptable to a ceiling type of solution, or they don't want to put something on the walls. Or it's, typically in executive meeting spaces, even some classrooms, if you have classrooms or training rooms, that sort of thing, it pops up into there. May incorporate video, so we'll talk a little bit more about that, but we're starting to see that show up in the corporate and government space as well. Accessibility. There's a growing demand for hearing assistance. Auracast technology is leading the way. Auracast is a low energy form of Bluetooth. The key thing with Auracast is that we describe it as broadcast, meaning that there are multiple devices within the same space that can accept a signal from an Auracast transmitter. And so it really expands how hearing assistance can be developed and used within a meeting space. Typical Bluetooth is, like a one-to-one. It's, there's not a lot of flexibility or multiple use in it. So let's take any questions before we get into the technology section. All right, we'll just keep moving along then. One of the solutions that we saw that came out of that I thought was really an interesting one, and it's just we use the Hudley cameras a lot in promoting collaboration solutions. Hudley is a real leader in using AI to create the look of the meeting, how people are included in the meeting, and that sort of thing. Over the last year, what we've seen is they've grown a multi-cam system called Crew, where you could have up to 5 cameras, all working together on a switch, so that you're always getting, who's speaking, getting that there up on screen, but then also being able to use technology to scan the room, make it feel more like a real live meeting other than just a direct focus on the person speaking. What they have done is they have expanded their product line with a product called the Hudley C1. And the C1 is designed as an all-in-one device. So that means you've got your camera, you've got your microphone, and your speaker all in one box. Obviously, with the camera background, they were working from that point. They had a very strong start to it. Then they worked very hard to make sure that the audio processing that they put into the device worked, so that they would have that overall quality product, both camera and audio, speaker and microphone system. It does look, a lot of the other solutions, they look like a video bar or an audio sound bar. This is a rectangle box. They did that, for the speakers that they wanted to put in there, so they could have a quality of sound coming out of there that covered a lot of the high and low frequencies. It is certified as up to a medium-sized room, and what that means, if we follow the Microsoft definition of room size, 20-foot distance. So what they're looking for, those 20-foot rooms, 20-foot long rooms, and less rooms. That's where this device is designed to work within. Interesting to note that it is going to be Google certified as well as Teams and Zoom certified. There are organizations, I work with a few of them, that use Google, whether it be Google Meet or Google Calendar, or the Google platform. And so to see a device Google certified is a little bit different, but there's a demand for that. So that's, they're really looking at the broad scope of product for that. I mentioned the Cruise solution, the multi-camera solution, in December with some firmware updates. The C1 will be capable of working within a multi-camera format. So, depending on the room, maybe you've got a little bit wider room, or the configuration or the tables, how you're setting them up is different, that it's hard for just one camera to pick them up the way you want. You can incorporate that into a multi-camera system. So that would be that. Now, what that means is that in certain rooms, that are that small to medium room, even though you may have a multi-camera system, you would be able to use this device for both the audio and the camera solution. Would be the overall AV solution within certain rooms, even though you have multi-cameras in there. Another new interesting product, one of our solutions, once again, Canadian made, which is a great solution. They're out of Calgary, and that's Nareva. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the HDL series of sound bars that they have. They've now come out with, or they'll be releasing the Nareva HDX series. And what this does, it overlaps and extends the coverage from the HDL 410, which was, covered the largest space. So with the right combination of product from Nareva, you can do up to a room that's 40 feet wide by 60 feet long. The starting point is 35 feet by 35 feet, so that large meeting space. If you'll notice, if you are familiar with the HDL 300 and 400 series, they're horizontally mounted. There's fairly tight specs of how you have to mount them. A lot of that is now not necessarily in place for the HDX series. You'll notice that they are vertically mounted. This is called the pod, and we'll touch in just a minute or two, we'll touch base why they would have a microphone pod. But you can notice, different mounting. You can use a pair, or you can use 4 to get to that sizing that you need to. If you're the HDL series, you always had to have a backing on it in order for the microphones to work properly, and for the microphone mist technology, the virtual microphones to spread throughout the room. With next product, you're not going to need that. The reason being is that it is a straight shoot, so that it's straight out, so it doesn't need that backing. That's why they designed it to look a little bit differently. Now, what that implies is that rooms that may have, like a theater style meeting room, maybe you have that sort of a meeting room where it's a theater style, it's much easier to incorporate this solution in and make it work successfully within that situation because of the way these can be mounted. You can have, as I said, up to 4 bars for that largest room. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about the mic pods. What we're seeing in this solution is a greater emphasis on the ability and functionality of voice lift. And so those pods that I showed you, they're strictly for voice lift. They don't have any, the bars, once again, are speakers as well as microphones, just as the HDL series was. These pods are strictly microphones used for voice lift. So you might see it, in a room where it's over, you've got a fixed table or that. You might put one of these microphone pods over the table, because that allows to develop the voice lift system. It is divisible rooms capable. So, if you've got, and we're working on a project with a large city, we were talking about this yesterday. They've got 2 rooms side by side. Sometimes those rooms are operated separately and independently from each other. Sometimes you want to combine that all together. You can do that with the HDL series, but also with this HDX series. So you'll be able to have divisible rooms. They've also worked to improve the in-room audio so that you've got a better coverage on both the higher and lower end frequencies. So let's say you've got a presentation, in-room presentation. It's not a hybrid meeting. You just simply want to present something, but you have some audio that you want to incorporate into that, whether it be, a person speaking, presenter speaking, or maybe you're playing some video for training purposes or presentation purposes. This solution has a higher quality sound, so it can become that sound space in your room as well. I mentioned voice lift. So it's adaptive voice lift. So where it needs voice lift, it will manage and process it, and you'll have voice lift in the room. We'll also have adaptive voice amplification, so that if voices need to be amplified, it will do that. You can use up to for amplification. You have this. We're working up to 4 mics. Also, in regards to microphones being wireless microphones being used when you want to have voice lift and need voice lift within that. The ability and breadth of microphones to be used in there is much greater than what the HDL originally came out with. So you could have lapel, handheld, headset, different ways of having a voice lift system with wireless microphones. Originally when voice lift came out, it was you really needed a headset, so it was right, microphone was right there. Now that breadth has expanded of the style of wireless microphones you can use. It will come with Auracast. I mentioned Auracast and assistive listening. It will be Auracast capable. So once again, that ability to have assisted listening in the room for people like me who have hearing aids. When I got my hearing aids, I made sure that when they were available, that there'd be a firmware upgrade that I could make them Auracast capable. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the Auracast solution, but know that you're going to be hearing a lot about Auracast in the future. Want to talk about immersive. This immersive has been around for a long time. They've been playing in that collaboration space. For the most part, they have been very much education product because they had some great solutions for education specific, active learning classrooms, that sort of thing, sharing in that. What they've released and come out with now is a collaboration suite, which very much puts them in that space of collaboration, sharing, video conferencing calls, that space. They're moving into that space with this new release that they've come out with. And so they have what they call their collaboration suite. It's a scalable type of solution. So you can come into it in different ways. Scalable and modular are big terms that you're hearing. That's almost a trend right now when it comes to collaboration solutions. So scalable is the word that Immersive is using. So the first part of the suite, where you can come into that entry level, it's called the Immersive Smart Suite Software. It is a software solution. There are no players or anything. It's really designed for working within a small space, a huddle space, where you can connect it to a smart TV in the room, or you have some sort of streaming device that you can connect it to. That's really what it's designed for, that small space sharing, that nature. The second part of their suite, as you step up, is what is called Immersive Essentials. It uses the Immersive Element box, so it does have some hardware aspect to it. Once again, it's designed for smaller spaces and huddle rooms. The focus on this is sharing, where you're coming into a room, into a meeting, and you want to share what's on your device within the room. That's what this is really designed for. I'm in a meeting, and there's 2 or 3 of us in a meeting. We each want to share. This is a great solution for that. So wireless screen sharing, and you can have, as I mentioned, multi-user reaction. So that's the second part of their suite, or the second solution within their suite. Where they've really stepped up is what is called the Immersive Pro. So this is their premier offering. It's a brand new hardware piece for them called the Generation 4, where they're using it. It does have subscription tiers to it, depending what you need within that and subscription. This is really a device where you can start connecting peripherals. So you can bring your camera and you can bring your audio in that. I just saw this morning, so I haven't had a chance to put it onto my PowerPoint, is that they now have plugins for both Teams and Zoom calls. So you've got these plugins that you can use to drive these meetings and that. So they have really stepped into the game with these devices and this suite of solutions. I've had a very strong focus when they talk about their product on security, making sure that's a very secure device, which is always important in everything. Security is extremely important within the collaboration space, and we don't ever want to move away from that. So that's immersive. I'm going to talk a little bit now about Barcode ClickShare. Some of you may or may not know this, but for a couple of years within Data Visual, I was the ClickShare specialist, promoting ClickShare to end users across the country. And it was interesting that part of the discussion I had at the time, when we were working together with ClickShare, was what are we going to do about MTRs? How do we address the MTR issue? Because as MTRs became more popular, in my mind, it wasn't the other hardware solutions like Immersive or some of the others that were out there that were the biggest competition to our ClickShare. It was MTRs. People who'd been putting ClickShare before in rooms were now putting MTR, setting up MTR rooms. And so for a while, we had the ClickShare C5 and C10, which we would use as input to drive content into an MTR. And then they released the CX50 Gen 2, which, when working with an MTR, could be that auto switcher. So you could, run your Teams meeting, but perhaps, the far end that you were going to call with on your next call would only do WebEx for security reasons, or what have you. I've got customers who focus on that. And so what the CX50 Gen 2 would allow you to do is to move it over, switch it over, become an auto switcher. So you go from your Teams meeting, start a WebEx meeting. When the WebEx meeting would just switch it back to the MTR the way you had to set up. So that was a development. I don't have it here, but about a year and a half ago, ClickShare also came out with the bar solution. So it was their version of the all-in-one that had, the microphone, the speakers, the camera, and the ClickShare device built into it. And they had a couple of models of that. So that's been about the last year and a half. However, the newest solution, this is going to start shipping probably in early 2026, is what is called the ClickShare Hub. So it is actually ClickShare's move to have an MTR solution. So I find it, spending so much time as the ClickShare specialist, to see them move in and have an MTR solution. It was really interesting for me to see this. They have two versions, the Hub Core, which is single screen, much like what a CX20 conferencing ClickShare would be like. And then there's a Hub Pro, dual screens, a little bit more capability. That is, equivalent to the CX50 Generation 2 device. You notice it's got the screen, just like any MTR, it's got the screen and the tablet to do that. One of the things that ClickShare did, or I guess I should say Barco as an organization did, was when they looked at how to come out with an MTR device, they worked very closely with Microsoft. And Microsoft has what is called MDEP, which is their Microsoft device protocols. And what Microsoft did was they developed MDEP really to manage Android MTRs, in general. And so it was because there's a lot of concerns, with Android, do we have the right version of Android and that sort of thing. So what Microsoft said, if you are going to use a Microsoft Teams room with Android, we're going to use MDEP to manage it. And MDEP is that way so that highest security, that you've always got the current version, and that you've got, everything's being fixed and addressed as it needs to be. So and very few companies have joined it. ClickShare was early to jump onto it. So they're one of the few MDEP partners that are selling Android MTRs under the MDEP protocol. What that means is, and it's an Android device, so that really they're not looking for solutions that are going to be window-based MTR. They're going to stick with the Android version under the MDEP platform. We talked about, one of the trends being video companies, meaning cameras, working with the audio, the microphone, and the speaker organizations. One of the companies that is really leading that push is Lumens with their cameras and their Cam Connect solution. So they work with a number of different microphone solutions. We work with them on different ones that we have. So they work with, as I said, multiple audio manufacturers, and that's using the Cam Connect Pro. One of the things, when we talk about the tracking, they have tracking cameras that are specific tracking cameras. They have AI cameras as well, which is a different way of tracking. AI tends to be, how do we get the group involved in the imaging that's going to the far side, where tracking tends to be following one specific person. So when I'm talking about tracking with people, I always want to make sure what their goal of tracking is. A couple things that Lumens has released within that solution base is a multi-voice tracking, uh, and that's through their camera. The VCTR60A is one of the cameras that does that they've released. What the multi-voice tracking mode does is it looks for that voice, and when it hears that voice, it will switch over to it, and then it will start, the facial and torso recognition in that. It allows for a very accurate so that it goes to where the voice is. There's always delays built into the algorithm so that, just because they hear a noise doesn't mean that it's going to go over there and bounce around and cause nauseousness at the far end and that. And when I saw this demonstrated, it was like open room within the InfoComm hallways and that. And so you would we had us talking and it would come to that voice and focus on that person's voice and that, even though it was an open hallway, there was no walls or anything like that. So it was very interesting to see that. Sometimes you have multi cameras in the room, so we're looking at a zone-based voice tracking is what it's called. So what it does is you set a zone that, okay, here, this is a zone where this camera goes. When you hear voices in this zone, this is where we want the camera to go and focus on, and within that zone. And so that's what zone-based voice tracking. So you're seeing all these different modes coming out so that people can find how they want the image to be sent to the far end. Talking a little bit about 3.2 USB technology, within the data visual family, we have a couple of solutions to look at. One of them being Hall Technology Discovery 3 series. They have 1 and 2, which are more on the USB 2.0. This and 3. This goes to 3.2. And with the Hall, you've obviously got your receiver, but your transmitter can be in the form of a box or it can be in the form of a wall plate. So let's say within that meeting space, you've got where the presenter or the chairman or the head of is doing it. They might just be able to plug into that wall plate right there, or have the run cable back to a transmitter located in a closet or something like that. The other one we have is the cute little, and they've got great colors, bright red color, but Turtle has that teal color. Turtle is a brand new company. It started out of Australia about a year ago. They have done some wonderful product. They won a number of awards at InfoComm, and one of the products that they do have is a 3.2 extender, and transmitter and receiver box. A couple of things that are in common between the Hall and the Turtle is they both require Cat 6A or Cat 7 cabling to run it. Hall racers at 90, Turtle racers at 100, so not a lot of difference there. The commonality is that besides the Cat cable, is you only need to power one end. So where it's most convenient to put the power, you power up that end. The other end will be powered through the extension. We talked about digital signage in meeting spaces and how that's starting to develop. Once again, it is designed to enhance visitor experience. So usually where we see this, you walk into, a company or a government office space or something like that, and you might see meetings that have glass walls. And, if there's not a meeting going on, it's kind of a blank room. What you can do by putting digital signage into there, you can have your messaging. You can be, tells people who you are or getting some messaging out. Or perhaps if, it's just within the room, enhancing your guest experience, your guests coming into the room. You can have a welcome message, anything like that. So that's what we're starting to see. That's starting to grow. I'm going to talk specifically about Carousel, which is one of the products we have. In order to meet this need, what we're seeing, CMS and Carousel in particular has done this, is they're expanding what can be used as a media player or an endpoint to get the digital signage. So, for example, just within the last few months, ClickShare has come on board. So with Carousel, so you can use, if you got a ClickShare device in your meeting room, you can use that as an endpoint for a Carousel digital signage. And MRSA has done that for a few years, and they definitely have that on their devices where you can bring in digital signage. What Carousel is also doing is working with some of the screen companies, some of the like Samsung, sorry, lost track. They're working with Samsung, they're working with LG to use the OS on their monitor. That was the word I was thinking, monitor. And so we're seeing be able to transfer digital signage there and use that as the endpoint media player. Carousel also has features like Express Player and what they call their Carousel Daily. Express Player is a way to see the digital signage on a mobile device. Daily is the ability, say within an organization, you've got a group of people that you want to send messaging to. It's done by a widget, so they can open up their widget and they can see the messaging that is specific for that group within the company or organization. Discussion systems. For those of you in government are probably much more aware of Televic than some of the people in our corporate makeup. And what we're seeing is demand for that product that would typically be used in a council chambers is now moving into the corporate boardrooms and government boardrooms. We're seeing it in education boardrooms as well, by the way. And this is that ability to have the microphones on the desk, and sometimes there's specific requirements for that. Typically where we're seeing it in the corporate market space is in executive boardrooms and government as well, with those rooms where people are coming in. It tends to be the higher end executives. They are demanding that a couple of things. They would like, in some cases, they want to have the video in front of them. They want to be able to do conference calls through this system. And so we're seeing that. And so a couple of Televic solutions that have fit into this. We talk about Discerno, which is sort of their entry-level product. It's a wired solution. What it does is you can record a meeting. You can take the audio out of it. You can bring you can have camera tracking within the Discerno system as well. And you can take all of that out onto like a video and conference call. So that's one of the solutions. Another solution that Televic has just released that is really focused at the corporate marketplace is what is called the Unicos Core. And the Unicos is a system where the picture that I have there, it's got the screen, it's got the microphone, it's got the speaker all built into one station. But what they've done is they've stripped down some of the features that you typically would see in a council chamber. You know, for example, you can't do voting, and there's different things like that. So we're starting to see that show up in the corporate marketplace. So that's, you know, one of those other trends that we're starting to see. Talk a little bit about accessibility. This is more talking about the assisted hearing at this point. As I mentioned, Auracast is the key solution being discussed. Auracast has been around for a couple years now, and what we see in the marketplace is that there's a momentum building for the Auracast solution. You know, for example, I talk about hearing aids. You know, Bluetooth has been a while in hearing aids, but now most of them are going Auracast. And so what we see in the next 2 to 3 years as we, you know, go through the literature and the studies and surveys that are happening out there is that Auracast is going to be that solution. And Auracast is a generic term. It's not a, you know, specific manufacturer. Auracast is a generic term that describes this type of Bluetooth. And so I said before, it's what we would call a broadcast solution in the sense that there are many different types of devices within the same collaboration and meeting space that can have access to the signal coming from the Auracast transmitter. So for example, as I said, you know, myself, hearing aids, they'll be Auracast. You know, manufacturers selling receivers that will receive the Auracast signal. Phones, I believe it's iOS 14 and up will be Auracast capable. Android is is more capable. They've got more options there that are Auracast capable. You'll have different headsets. Different headset manufacturers are you know, coming up with Auracast capable solutions. So within the next 2-3 years, we just see this becoming the dominant solution and go-to for these type of devices. And so just a couple of references within our framework with what we deal with. I mentioned earlier, Nareva HDX will be Auracast compatible when it starts to ship in that. Listen was a really early adopter of the whole Auracast technology, and they already have solutions that they're selling, and we've been testing. We have customers who are using it, or have set up rooms so that they can show their campuses, or others within their organization how this will work. And so you got a picture there. We've got the transmitter, we've got the receiver, and just a little charging station. So that's Auracast in a nutshell. That's the end of my talk and presentation. Open it up to any questions you might have.